Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and we are on episode 260. And today I have a special guest, Dr. Dympna Weil. She is a board-certified OB-GYN, certified master coach, writer, and the founder of Prescribing Possibility, a platform dedicated to the well-being of caregivers, healthcare professionals, and others who are overwhelmed, overworked, and overlooked. After a neurologic disorder upended her career and identity, Dympna transformed her healing journey into a powerful message of self-compassion. She now teaches others how to replace the myth of balance with the practice of harmony through her coaching work, podcast, speaking engagements, and educational frameworks, where her work blends story, science, and soul, helping individuals and communities recover, reconnect, and reclaim what truly matters. Dympna, welcome to Hustle and Flow.
Thank you for having me, Heather. It's a pleasure and an honor.
So I would love for you to share with everyone first the neurologic disorder that upended everything for you. I had a similar story where I was taken out, and I think as professionals, so many of us assume that like nothing is ever going to happen that is going to impact our career, our identity. And I think it would be really helpful for everyone to hear your story.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to share it. I think it is powerful, particularly as professionals, as you mentioned, to kind of share these things. So I was a person who ran at 100 miles an hour, like many, delivering babies, doing surgeries, taking call, all the things. And it was maybe 6 months into the pandemic when I went into work like it was a regular normal day. And shortly after arriving, something just was amiss. I didn't feel exactly right. And I started to have like sensory issues. Things sounded too loud. The lights were too bright. I couldn't process. I liken it to that like spinning wheel of death on the computer when everything is trying to compute but can't. That's how my brain was. That's how I felt. And because it was COVID, it took about 9 months to get a diagnosis. And vestibular migraine, I had had that chronically, I guess. That was the thought at the time. And another condition called persistent postural perceptual dizziness, or 3PD, which is just basically a condition where your body gets used to and your brain gets used to the state of feeling abnormal and not being balanced. And it kind of continues that path even when you have recovered from the other conditions. So people sometimes develop it when they're on cruises or they have vertigo for some reason. Mine came because of my migraines. And yeah, so you can imagine, I couldn't get off the couch. In the beginning, I couldn't drive. And, I still can't ride a bike or take stuff out of a cabinet or turn really fast without feeling unsteady. So that's what took me out of work, because can't deliver babies and do surgeries in that condition, certainly.
So what was that process like? Learning that you couldn't have the career that you had always had. And I do think as professionals, we identify with those degrees, we identify with those careers. And so when we can no longer practice them, we start to question, well, who am I? What's my purpose? What was that process like for you to have that taken away, not really by choice?
Yeah, and you hit the nail right on the head there. It's the lack of choice that really just was very difficult to wrap my brain around, and I still struggle with, quite frankly, you know, but not on a daily basis, but from time to time, I'm like, if I had chosen this, it would have been one thing. But the loss of identity was a profound, just complete hole in my heart. I identified as a doctor. And to me, that meant I was wearing my white coat. I was delivering babies. I was taking care of people in that capacity. And I no longer could do that. And so the idea that I was no longer a doctor was kind of like flooding my senses. And it was a tricky place to be and to navigate. Because not only was it the physical part, but part of this condition is also a little bit of like cognitive slowing and fatigue, which I did notice quite profoundly in the beginning, and still struggle with. So like it was all in all this I don't know, this container of just emptiness. Like this was mine and now it's no longer mine. And I struggled to really figure out who I was. I went to, reading or listening to audiobooks, and I got a lot of solace from reading Martha Beck's work. And then I went on to train as a coach with her, mostly for myself, really. I had no intentions of using it really for others, but as the pandemic wore on, it proved to be useful for other people too.
So how did you shift to, I mean, obviously it sounds like it was part of the coaching work, but
Mhm.
how did you shift to this focus on well-being, on
Yeah.
taking care of yourself, of compassion, not just for yourself, but for others within the healthcare community, and then eventually even beyond that?
Yeah. So interestingly, um, well-being was something I was very passionate about prior to this happening. So a couple years prior to that, I had started a well-being committee at my organization, which was for OB hospitalists. And part of that was to try and get ahead of the burnout crisis that was brewing and starting, with programming and things. It was before the time of, chief wellness officers, CWOs, and all that sort of thing. It wasn't in vogue yet, but taking care of oneself was a real. It had increasingly become more obvious that needed to happen and that we needed to take care of each other. So I started the work with that committee. I was a peer-to-peer counselor in my group as well. And so it was something I just kind of gravitated to. And so it was a pretty natural extension to later on continue that work and in a different way. But what was interesting, I think, now that I can look back on it, was that in that time, I was helping others take care of themselves. And then afterwards, I went back to helping others take care of themselves. And what I recognized was that I was the one who needed the help and the care. And I did not know how to do that for myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when we think of healthcare professionals, there, I mean, you're literally trained to help and care for others. And I do think there was, even from a cultural standpoint, you started to hear conversations during the pandemic
Hmm.
because healthcare workers were working so much. But like when you go to medical school, do you learn anything about how to care for yourself? I mean, I would imagine there's so many things that you actually deal with on a daily basis. Now, obviously, depending on the area you're in, it might look a little bit different, but just trauma. And you've got people who are showing up that are presenting with a lot of stress and anxiety about whatever it is that they're experiencing, and you're trying to diagnose them or care for them. And and a lot of times, like you hear about nurses, my sister-in-law used to be in the delivery room. She was a
Oh,
nurse, and
hmm.
she was like, we didn't get to eat. there was no such thing as a break. Like,
Mhm.
I know another who was like, I remember eating a hard boiled egg sitting on the toilet while I was peeing. And that sounds nasty, but it was like, that was how much time I had to use the restroom and eat. And so it's just so interesting to me that healthcare professionals care for others, but don't care for themselves. Like, is that
Mhm.
even addressed in law school? I mean, sorry, I'm talking
You
about my
said
own
law school.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, in medical school, do they talk about that in medical school? Medical school, is that within the facilities and the hospitals? How does that
No.
work?
So that is not an uncommon sort of story. Like, I wasn't surprised when I heard that, sadly. Um, and when I went to school, no, it wasn't. Um, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in so much as we had like humanism in medicine as a course. And it was great and it was thought provoking. But when push came to shove and we were on the wards actually doing the work, that was not at all something that was taught. In fact, explicitly it wasn't taught, and implicitly it certainly wasn't taught, because we were observing people not taking their breaks, not using the restroom. I can remember that exact feeling myself. One day I must have been a chief, and I was operating with one of the senior oncology attendings. Um, and we're at the scrub sink, and I'm just scrubbing my hands and we're just chit chatting. And I just kind of looked a little wonky. It's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, did you eat anything? I was like, well, no, enough time. I was getting another patient situated. And he like pulled me aside and he was like, go eat something, because you're of no use to me and you're of no use to the patient if you're on the floor. That was as close as I got to
Yeah.
somebody actually saying something about it. Um, you're actually taught that you have to suppress your own needs for the needs of others. And there are times and places where that's 100% true. But when that's the prevailing kind of, MO, it's not healthy for anybody, really.
Well, and when you already think about it's so interesting. I went into my annual exam just 2 weeks ago, and the nurse was telling me that she was actually trying to find another job because right, like it's just so stressful. And I know so many people in the medical profession who are like moving into jobs that are less stressful, but we also need people to show up and do these jobs. And so it's not just, in my mind, a healthcare crisis.
No.
It is a community crisis if we are not helping take care of the healthcare professionals that we need
Yeah.
in order to receive care.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, people have left. There was like a mass exodus. Now there's continued to be this like mass resignation. Um, and while we do have people that are going into fields in medicine, they are not experienced, right? We're losing people who have been doing this, who have that clinical experience, in droves because of so many factors. And to your point, it really is a community issue. It's a societal issue. And I think until we have enough people recognizing that caregiving doesn't mean exclusion of care from yourself, right? You don't have to give it all away. In fact, you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. Um, because really we're our first patients, but we don't look at it that way.
Well, and some people may be listening and they're not healthcare professionals at all,
Mhm.
but we have an aging population,
Yes.
and there are so many just caregivers in the population. So whether you are caring for a child, maybe it's because they're an infant, or maybe it's because they have special needs, or you are caring for a parent, or maybe it's, someone else in your family because something, happened. And we just don't talk about that because they're working
Mhm.
and they're taking care of others.
Mhm.
And my grandfather, he just passed away, and I was witnessing, right,
Sorry.
my aunts and my mother deal with this where they're just on the clock 24/7, and we don't talk about how caretakers take care of themselves.
Yeah. I am sorry for your loss. And I recognize the difficulties, right, that we all kind of face in those situations. I had a similar thing with my grandfather many years ago, but even my dad has gone through 2 bouts of cancer, and I have, witnessed up close because I was there with him, helping to take care of him. It's a lot. And I think part of the issue, Heather, is that in our culture, we we have expectations that it's just something that someone's going to do. Tends to be women more than men, not exclusively, of course, right? But it does tend to be women. Um, and, we don't talk about the fact that it is a reason why we maybe don't take that promotion, or we don't go for it in the first place, or why we go part time. I think there's so many factors involved, but it certainly affects all of us in very profound ways. And the idea that we should be taking care of ourselves in the midst of all that's going on is just so hard to wrap our brains around, I think. Because in the moment, all we're thinking about is that other person, but we're really of very little use, or of less use to everyone, when we're not caring for ourselves.
Yeah, I think the common refrain is like, I don't have time. If I'm not doing it, if I'm not taking care of them, who's going to take care of them?
Yeah.
So, do you have tips or advice or recommendations for people who feel like they're in that spiral where they're like, how would I even possibly take care of myself? I don't have options to take care of myself.
Yeah. It's a real practice of looking for, I look at it as, the difference between balance and harmony. Like, we try to balance all these things. We never really quite get it right. Because and that's what we think, right? We can't do it. We can't do it. We're failing. It's too hard to manage everything. I started to shift my thinking into a different framework. And that framework, instead of balance, is harmony. And to me, harmony means wholeness. It means having all of the parts of us, the parent part, the child part, the caregiver part, in your case, former lawyer, doctor, whatever it is, right? All those parts of us are welcome. They are important, and they need to be tended to. And so when we look at this experience through harmony, one of the ways that we can like attain that is it's a process, right? It's an ongoing practice of just staying in the moment, even. So it could be as simple as stopping to take a breath in between the tasks you're doing. It could be every morning going out for a 2-minute walk in the sun to get some sun on your face. It doesn't have to be this regimented experience. There are so many different ways that we can nourish ourselves, um, with sleep and water and all the things you'll hear. But it really it comes down to very simple practices where we may not have a lot of time, but we can find time for something as simple as, a box breathing technique where we're just mindfully breathing, right? It brings us right back into the present moment. So I think my advice would be just to remember that there is time. We make the time, right? It's not there for the taking. We certainly could fill it up with all sorts of stuff, but if we are very conscious about our choices, we can just set aside a minute or two. We are all worth a minute or two of our own time, and no matter what else is going on.
It reminds me of when I was first learning meditation and mindfulness,
Hmm.
and I would be like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And I know that whenever I get in the space of I don't have time, I actually know that means I need it
Yes.
more than ever because my
Absolutely.
mind has lost perspective.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's an excellent point. We, it's that we get into, I like to call it like these runaway trains of thought.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have time. And then as you're circling around the station out of control with that runaway train, you're going to come up with all the thoughts and all of the situations that support that. I don't have time. I don't have time to eat right. I don't have time to sleep right. I don't, da, 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 right? And the train's out of the station. And all it takes is to either slow it down or to like prevent it from coming out of the station eventually, because you'll have the thought and say, I need to just chill for a minute. I need to do my mindful breathing, or I like to do tapping. So, that's one of my own techniques,
Hmm.
but whatever it is for a given person, it's finding that thing that works for you in the moment to help you come back to the moment. That will stop the runaway train. That will keep
Hmm.
you present and focused. And to your point, reprioritize the here and the now. And you recognize that you do have time for yourself.
I'm curious about your thoughts on asking for help. So there's taking care of yourself, right? But I have noticed that like so many, and you're right, I hadn't really thought of it, but every caretaker I've ever known in my families,
Hmm.
um, when it comes to taking care of people with special needs or aging adults, it is the women.
Hmm.
And it just, I've not had to experience that myself yet, but it just seems that either they don't ask for help, or when they want it in a very specific way. And if they can't get it that way, then it's like an all or nothing,
Hmm.
or like, I should be able to handle this. And so I'm just curious whether it's in the healthcare profession or just you're witnessing it with caregivers in general. Where does asking for help come into play?
So
Or
I
being
can,
open to help
well, I
that's
was going to
not
say
perfect.
sometimes, right. Sometimes it's not even asking. It's just like acknowledging that help could be handy. Right. It's so funny that you bring this up, because this is like an ongoing talk I have with my therapist, because I struggle with asking for help, and it's something that I have to work on. And that's both has been in the professional setting, which interestingly, I had far less of a hard time asking for help when it came to caring for patients if I thought that I could use an extra set of hands. I still haven't figured out why that is, but in that environment, no problem. I know what I know. I know what I could use some additional help with. I will ask the person I think can help me, and that's that. In the personal world, asking for help is such a tricky thing for me personally. And I know I'm not alone in that. Because, particularly as women, I think we have to work extra hard to get to where we are. We have to, you know, assert ourselves in a different way to gain whether it's recognition or the respect in our professional realms, or what have you. And so I think that just having to ask for help sometimes can feel like we're not really worthy of that. And that's where I think we kind of steer wrong. It's thinking that asking for help is the weakness. In fact,
Mm.
it is the exact opposite, right? So if I apply it to my work world, I never had a problem, because my job was to take care of somebody else, to take care of them to the best of my ability. And if I thought that I needed an extra set of hands for something, well, I'm just going to ask for that, because that's in that patient's best interest. I didn't necessarily apply that precisely in my own life. And it's something that I'm working on, quite
Yeah.
honestly. And I think it's something that we all kind of have to work on. And, when we start with being kind to ourselves and learning how to hold ourselves with a little bit of compassion, and we can, I think it all comes back to caring for the self, because when we it becomes more automatic to care for ourselves. I think that is when we kind of let down the armor, and we let down all of the pretenses and the shoulds and we can more readily accept help.
Mhm.
So I think it all comes back to we all need to look out for ourselves, and not in that selfish, narcissistic way, right? It's really going forth with love for ourselves, and then we can carry that out to others. So that's how I've been thinking about it lately. And I think it is a practice. It's something that, I have to be mindful about, truly.
It's all about building skills and undoing
Hmm.
the cultural norms that we were taught. Will
Totally.
you share with everyone about your C.A.L.M method and how they can learn more about
Oh,
that?
funny enough, I actually have it over here. Haha. I didn't know I was going to be prepared like that. Look at me. I think I have it over here. Yes, I do. So this is my C.A.L.M method, and it is
Nice.
about compassion, awareness, listening, and mindfulness.
Mm,
And so by practicing each of the components, it's really like a holistic way of kind of coming back to that inner harmony and that present moment and peace. So it's just a simple way to kind of remember, how do I just calm my system down? And if you remember calm, having a little bit of compassion instead of criticizing ourselves, which we're very good at, how can I turn down the criticism and show myself a little bit more kindness? If we're talking about awareness, it's really just noticing, oh, it's interesting that I go right to, I'm not a good enough daughter if I'm not taking care of my parent 24/7. That's interesting that that's how I do it. It's all with curiosity as opposed to criticism, right? Um,
mhm.
the L is listening. So it's being able to be still and be in that moment and think about, really just focus our attention on ourselves and our bodies and kind of the information we gather there, and connecting with other people. And the mindfulness really just is a method of letting us slow down. And that looks different for everybody. Some do meditation, some do yoga. I do tapping. Um, some people go for a walk in nature and that's their meditation. My daughter swims. That's her meditation. So, I think if we can, be purposeful in that, seeking mindfulness, that's the other way that we can just bring our nervous system into a state of peace and calm. And from there, we make better decisions. We make better choices. And from all those decisions and choices, our life looks different.
I love it. If you all want to go grab a copy of the C.A.L.M method, whether you are a healthcare professional, a caregiver, or you're just caring for yourself, that is all of us. So everyone
Mhm.
needs a copy of this. We will put a link in the show notes. We're also going to have a link to Dympna's Prescribing Possibility podcast. So you can listen to that. We'll have all of her other social media handles and website in the show notes as well. Dympna, thank you so much for coming on Hustle and Flow. I think each and every one of us needed the reminders that you shared with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I wish everybody peace in their hearts and to look for harmony.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.